is great for America.
Hi everyone, this is Zach with the Money Channel. Tesla's stock price rose by almost 7% following an announcement that General Motors has joined Ford in agreeing to utilize Tesla's electric vehicle charging network. Analysts believe this partnership could establish Tesla's Superchargers as the industry standard in the United States. We have Cathie and Gene Munster for more.
I was ARK Invest CIO and CEO Cathie Wood. Tesla is, of course, the top holding of the ARK Innovation ETF.
Well, I think it's great for America and our transition to the electric future, as Elon said. And I do think it increases the probability that our forecast of 60 million electric vehicle sales by 2027, it has increased the probability that that is right. We had globally 7.7 electric vehicles sold around the world last year, going to 60 million, and is going to completely dominate the industry. And I think having both General Motors and Ford on this charging network, which is the big gating factor, range anxiety, gets us there that much faster.
I think there's two questions. Some people would say, great, long-term, short-term and long-term for Ford and GM. Everybody's a winner in this. There are others that are concerned that say, maybe great for Ford and GM short-term. I think there's almost no question about that. The question is what happens long-term if effectively two of the largest American automakers are effectively driving sales effectively to Tesla, both in terms of the electric power piece of it and effectively the advertisement that is a Tesla charging station, what that means long term in terms of Elon Musk's ability to sell more vehicles, potentially even at cheaper prices.
You know, this reminds me of what happens with most technologies that proliferate and scale. There's a standard, and here we have a charging standard. Charging solves the range anxiety problem. And what's also very interesting about this is it does help Tesla underwrite the charging station expense, because if you look at Tesla's sales, they are highly concentrated on the coasts. Now it's going to make a lot more sense for Tesla to roll out charging stations that much faster throughout the country.
Right. How much of their revenue and profits do you now imagine over time will be a function of the infrastructure part of their business versus the automobile manufacturing part of their business?
Well, actually, we think another revenue source is going to be much bigger. And of course, that's the autonomous taxi platform. And we think it's going to drive the valuation because the margins associated with autonomous are going to be SaaS-like. So instead of electric vehicle gross margins in the 25 to 30% range, we expect autonomous, the platform strategy, to deliver 80%, 90% margin. So the combined will be north of 50%.
In terms of the grid, though, that they're building and these charging stations, you think that's a small part of the business?
We have not counted. So we are in print at $2,000 in 2027, and we have not counted the possible revenue sources associated with this strategy. And we haven't even done much in the energy storage business away from electric vehicles, because we think the most valuable part of the business will be the scaling of vehicles to create this autonomous taxi platform.
This is a positive step for a small business that investors historically have not given much attention to. That is that infrastructure, that charging network. There are publicly traded companies that do just that. But still, when you look at the context of Tesla's overall market cap, look at their revenue, this is a fractional business and will probably remain a small business. Even with the addition of Ford, GM, and other car makers, undoubtedly will go to this charging network. So I view this more as a positive for GM and Ford. It's probably a neutral, a slight positive for Tesla, like we talked about, because they will pick up some infrastructure revenue. But ultimately is that they are giving the rails to these competitors which have been struggling. Right. And I think traditional auto is in a really tight spot over the next decade, in part because of infrastructure. Now, good news for Ford and GM, they're going to be leveraging that. I think ultimately what Elon is doing here is he's making good on his promise that he wants to advance electrification. This is part of the company's mission statement to advance the energy independence. And so I think he's doing this as more of a move for greater EVs than a positive for Tesla.
Look, I think it's an extraordinary thing what he's now done. And there's no question. I mean, these mortal enemies. You probably listened to that Twitter Spaces between Mary Barra and him yesterday. I mean, it was awkward, to be honest with you, just hearing the different personalities on the phone. But it's an amazing thing. The thing that the upside, of course, is for the industry, for the country. And by the way, I was going to argue for Tesla generally in terms of potentially both revenue and the sort of marketing and advertising they get from every time any of these vehicles now go to a Tesla charging station. Having said that, one of the things that's popped up on Twitter, no less, this morning is a number of folks who say, look, there's now a line around the block already for some of these Tesla charging stations. And the line is only going to grow larger. That's not actually a good thing for the Tesla brand. What do you make of that?
It's something that's real. If you'd poll Tesla owners, I'm not one of them, but if you'd poll a Tesla owner, they would probably be disappointed in this announcement. One thing that came up on that Twitter space yesterday that you're referring to is that Tesla would not give preferential treatment in terms of being able to jump the line with some of these other car makers in the charging line, and I think and they would not essentially demote what these other car makers are getting from a technology as speeding the charging speed times. So they're not going to meter it, and I think that that is something that could backfire is probably too strong of a word, but this range anxiety, Cathie is spot on. Range anxiety is the big issue here. It's kind of a bizarre topic but ultimately range anxiety and charging times and those wait lines all play into it. Right. And I think you could see a situation where this is viewed as a negative by Tesla owners.
They may not advantage GM or Ford per se, but my question was actually going to be whether you think that the way the charging stations ultimately will work, that it'll still be a more seamless process if you're a Tesla driver over one of the others.
They addressed that, both the Ford and the GM announcements addressed that in a subtle way, is that next year these cars will be able to be charged from the Tesla charging networks with an adapter. 2025, they want to embed the charging network into their software. So what that means is that if you were going to go on a trip right now with a Tesla, you can pinpoint your destination, and then it will optimize your charging route, essentially. That is something that is integrated. That's going to start, they say, in 2025. And so I think from a user experience, the Ford and GM is going to be pretty similar to Tesla in 2025. Now, that's just for the charging piece. I think Tesla has an advantage when it comes to software. Ford would agree with that. So maybe there is some fit and finish around the software that isn't quite the same. But the substance of it, there's going to be relatively parity around the charging experience by 2025.